Everyone knows about the BFG 9000. Well, have you ever heard of the BFG 10,000? No, not that one. The original, the BFG10K from Quake 2, the true OG. Compared to the BFG 9000, which is admittedly counterintuitive, the BFG10K has a bit more visual feedback going on. You fire a green ball of energy, the green ball of energy shoots lasers at nearby targets, the green ball explodes and deals damage to bad guys. Fairly simple, no? Well, of course not, silly bums. Otherwise, this video wouldn't be 12 minutes and 34 seconds long. So, enough intro. Let's go check out the BFG10K and its inner workings. The first BFG10K of Quake 2 can be found in the first level of the power plant unit, where it's tucked away in a secret area, which is actually pretty hard to miss. Well, technically the first BFG can be found in the secret level of the previous factory unit. Sudden Death has a BFG10K behind a wall that cannot be opened in single player. This wall is removed for deathmatch, but for some reason the BFG is flagged to still appear in single player. Small oversight, probably. Anyway, just like its cousin number 9000, the acronym BFG stands for Big freaking gun. What? That's what the manual says. Hey, poo has nothing to do with this. Picking up the BFG10K gives you 50 cells, which is also the amount of cells required per shot. Just like the railgun, the BFG emits a low humming sound. This is probably added for deathmatch to warn other players that there's someone walking around with a BFG equipped. When you pull the trigger, the BFG winds up for 0.9 seconds and discharges a large ball of green energy. Yes, that's the same BFG ball sprite as Doom. Can't blame it for recycling that one. That sprite is fresh as heck. After the shot, the player pulls back the lever to reload the next shot. A few enemies in Quake 2 will try to duck under shot projectiles. The way this works is that the player casts a ray when firing a projectile, and if the ray hits an enemy, then it will do an RNG call to see if it should duck or not. Soldiers, infantries, gunners, brains, Iron Maidens, and medics can all duck. I think it's pretty funny that this duck mechanic was added for BFG projectiles too, considering the BFG's devastating power will wipe them out anyway. There's a little detail which causes your BFG's pre-fire to be interrupted. If you take damage while your power armor is up, which, if you didn't know, uses your cells to absorb damage, and your cells drop below 50, then the BFG won't fire a shot at all. The BFG10K can fire every 2.5 seconds. Alright, time for damage numbers. For demonstration purposes, we've stripped the BFG from all of its secondary effects. We'll gradually add these back as we go through the different types of damage it can deal. Let's start with the simple stuff. The BFG projectile travels at 400 units per second. A direct hit with the BFG ball itself deals 200 damage. It also deals splash damage, but not to the entity that collided with the projectile. In case it sounds confusing, here's an example with a group of enemies. The one colliding with the projectile receives the 200 damage and no additional splash damage. But the enemies surrounding it do receive splash damage. Splash damage is also dealt if no entity is hit, so through a collision with the floor or wall. The splash damage has a radius of 100 units and deals a maximum damage of 200. If the splash damage hits the owner of the projectile, then the damage is halved. Enjoy those epic BFG jumps, you crazy BFG jumpers. Wait a minute. Interestingly, both these damages are not affected by the damage multiplying power-ups, such as the quad damage. No need to worry about launching your body parts to the moon with a quad BFG jump. Also, despite its pretty large sprite, the actual collision model is a mere point. Okay, now for the laser beams. A traveling BFG ball emits damaging lasers at targets that are within its radius of 256 units. Every 10th of a second, these lasers will lock onto targets and deal damage. Just a heads up, the BFG's projectile speed will be modified to 0 for some of these demonstrations. Let's have a look what exactly the BFG ball is looking for to fry with its laser beams. Well, don't try to fry yourself, obviously. Also, don't fry your owner, which in this case means the one who pulled the trigger. The target within the radius must be damageable. It must also be a monster, or another player, or an explosive barrel. Marines and their corpses are considered monsters, by the way. The Ground Zero expansion pack has an additional check to seek for Tesla coils, proxies, and anti-matter bombs. these will always get fried, regardless if they were deployed by you or another player. There's one more check exclusive to capture the flag to ensure you don't emit lasers at your teammates. The target seeking is slightly flawed. It can see targets through solid geometry, so you may see lasers getting shot into walls. And no, lasers do not go through walls, unfortunately. Now it's time to do damage. The laser will do damage to the target if it's damageable, has no laser immunity, and the target is not the owner of the projectile. The laser immunity flag is interesting. There's only one enemy in Quake 2 who is immune to lasers, and it's the Hornet boss. Probably to make sure the big laser in the big gun arena doesn't kill it. Well, unfortunately for the player, this causes the Hornet to be completely unaffected by the BFG's lasers. The laser is still emitted, but no damage will be dealt. In the Ground Zero expansion pack, the laser immunity is also given to the Carrier boss and the Black Widow final boss. Anyway, those that fit the criteria will receive 10 damage in single player. They are slightly nerfed for deathmatch, where they'll deal 5 damage. Once again, power-ups like the quad damage do not multiply the damage here. Cool thing is that these lasers can pierce through targets. Because of the piercing capabilities, the lasers can do damage to things it normally doesn't even target, like breakable walls and shootable buttons. The geometry must be solid though, so stuff like breakable windows will not shatter. Any brush that is considered transparent is ignored, so lasers will pass through it. This way can kill normally unreachable entities. The laser will pierce through targets until it hits a solid wall. When it happens, render some spark particles. Due to an oversight, these are rendered as black particles. You can set the particles' colors through 4 bytes. Each byte points to a palette index in the color map, which is then cycled through in order. Its software forgot to initialize a color value for the laser sparks, so all 4 bytes are essentially 0, pointing to index 0, which is black. This is easily fixed by setting the particle color to hexadecimal value D0, D1, D2, D3, which points to these 4 indices. Look, green sparky sparky. Beautiful. Lasers don't have unlimited range though, they have a maximum length of 2048 units. Pretty much a non-issue, since most levels in Quake 2 are fairly compact. And that's it for the lasers. In short, they will deal 100 damage per second per laser in single player, and in deathmatch it's 50 damage per second. The cherry on top of the BFG's damage is its special explosion, which has without a doubt the most devastating effects. It's also somewhat complex, but I'll walk you through it. When the BFG ball explodes, it will scan for targets within a 1000 unit radius. First it checks if this target is damageable. If that's the case, then move on to the next condition. Make sure to not target the owner of this BFG projectile. Lastly, it will do 2 line of sight checks. The BFG explosion checks if the scanned target is in its line of sight. It takes the target's bounding box into consideration. The second line of sight check is then done with the scanned target and the owner of the projectile. The owner does not have to face the target or explosion. If the scanned target can cast uninterrupted rays to the BFG explosion and the owner of the projectile, then receive damage. The damage is based on the distance between the explosion and the target, with a maximum of 500 damage on single player and 200 damage on deathmatch. Larger distance means less damage. Guess what? This damage is affected by power-ups, such as quad damage. Hallelujah! When the damage is dealt, show smaller BFG explosions at the targets. OMG, more recycled Doom graphics. Unlike the lasers, the BFG explosion effect does scan for damageable geometry, such as cracked walls. Also, for some reason, there's this line of code which halves the damage if the target is the owner of the projectile, which is strange because an earlier condition ensures the explosion effect never targets the owner. By the way, the BFG explosion doesn't care if the projectile owner is alive or not. If you die while the projectile is still traveling, then the BFG explosion will deal damage to targets as long as your corpse and explosion are visible to the target. You know, you're not the only one who can equip the BFG10K. Quake 2's final boss, Macron, also has one. It's slightly weaker than the players though. The damage for direct hits, splash and lasers are all the same as the players. The projectile is slightly slower at 300 units per second instead of 400. The most drastic change is the BFG's explosion effect. The explosion effect radius is decreased from 1000 to a mere 200 when Macron is riding its battlesuit, Jork. Without the battlesuit, the radius slightly increases to 300. The effect's damage is also much weaker than the players. 50 damage instead of 500. Understandable though. Can you imagine Macron with a BFG exactly the same as the players? It would create an interesting fight though, where you have to stay out of Macron's or the explosion's line of sight. But that would require the player to have profound knowledge of the BFG10K. The Macron's BFG does exceed at fire rate. The projectile is deployed instantly and can be refired with little to no delay. Strangely enough, the BFG makes no firing sound when the battlesuit is active. Okay, I know what you're going to comment. Who cares about this ancient Quake 2 version? What about the 2023 remaster? The remaster has some gameplay changes. Does that include the BFG10K? Well, obviously the visuals look different. The projectile received an upgrade. Now it recycles Doom 64's BFG ball. Cool. It also emits temporary tendrils across the area. These are purely cosmetic and don't do damage. Some more visual changes include tendrils shot from the BFG explosion to the targets when the BFG's explosion effect occurs. For some reason, they changed it so the BFG explosion effect doesn't target damageable geometry anymore. The small oversight where the BFG projectile tries to fire lasers at targets behind walls has been fixed in the remaster. They don't pierce anymore though. They also don't kill entities behind transparent brushes either. Another change in the remaster is how energy weapons behave against power screens and shields. Energy weapons such as the BFG10K will deplete the target's power armor twice as fast. Oh, and they added the BFG firing sound when Macron's riding its battlesuit. Yippee! Quake 2's BFG10K is legendary. Both Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal's BFGs are modeled after Quake 2's after all. Big green ball of energy, emitting deadly laser beams at enemies, and killing pretty much everything when the BFG ball explodes. Yep, it's awesome. This channel's last Quake 2 analysis video was 5 years ago. Wowie. I felt like doing a Quake 2 video, so I hope you liked it. May this new BFG10K knowledge help you on your way to dominate those deathmatch servers. Thanks for watching. As always, shoutouts to the patrons and YouTube members for supporting the channel. You're all beautiful people. More shoutouts to all the green and magenta colored names coming up. Agonizing Oral Pain, Andri Dieklin, aka Mackhauser, Anthony Sicko, Art Cox, Beaks Make Me Coom, Ben of Langley, Big Gulps, Huh? Bitcore, Bofu, Bandestorm, Florida Man, Green Knight 9000, I Don't Funkin Know, John Hopper, Joseph Shans, Katsune Teku, Kiryu Gorobets, Master Biggie, Matthias Sippert, Max Payne 67, Old Man Han, Pete Petersen, Pyroshi, Quake Gamer 632, Raven King, Riley, Robert Wakely, Sean Anana, Space Duck, Specteer, Stack Jacobs, Stephen Bone, Tekokami, Thomas, Timothy Collar, Turbine 2K5, Victor Reek, and Who's Ace. See you next time. Bye bye.